A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Khairy. I'm the Managing Director of NEC Corporation Malaysia. I'll be the MC for this morning's live forum. On behalf of the organizer, Social and Economic Research Initiative and NEC Malaysia, I would like to welcome everyone to Ceres Digital Dialogue live forum this morning. Ceres Digital Dialogue session brings together country leaders, experts, researchers, and global technology and consulting company together to discuss on social and economic issues, challenges, and potentially the remedy in a series of panel-led discussion, and to set the stage for the irrelevant industries and sectors to move forward together, embracing digitalization in Malaysia. The topic for today's discussion is unlocking blockchain, and the session today is actually broadcast live by Media Prima over NST Online, Tonton, Malaysia Reserve, as well as the Ceres' own Facebook Live pages. You can also access it via the Zoom application, where you can see the link on Ceres' Facebook and LinkedIn pages. And for our audience who join us online, please feel free to ask us questions. Just tap on the Q&A button in the Zoom application or leave your comments on the social media. We will pick some of the questions for answering at the end of the session today. Ladies and gentlemen, blockchain is synonymous with the accounting method for Bitcoin, but gradually the technology has been evolved to keep track of records by any different digital currency transactions without the need of having a centralized record keeping. And over time, the technology is widely recognized as being able to create and track records of virtually anything that is of value. And therefore, blockchain technology is further enhanced and evolved to be of use by the enterprise who seeks to realize the potential that the blockchain technology can provide over traditional system architecture. Blockchain itself is creating a paradigm shift in the way that individuals, businesses, and governments conduct transactions. Enabling secure and trusted transactions, blockchain technologies certainly have the capability to actually promote a global digital economy by providing a digitally integrated global economy better than what we have. At its core, blockchain is effectively a distributed database of transactions maintained by individuals with computers who chooses to actually participate in it. So each transaction, each entry will be created and stored in the block, which is linked to the previous block, creating a distributed ledgers of transaction or database. Even though blockchain technology today is still in the early stages of development, we have seen numerous applications, especially in the financial services, especially in the public services, that give us the conviction, give us the evidence that blockchain technology is certainly a world-changing technology. And we have here today a group of distinguished panelists to help us to discuss, to share the view on the importance of blockchain technology and importance of unlocking blockchain technology in Malaysia. And we are glad that they are here today despite the CMCO. Rest assured, everyone here is following the SOP. We are putting all the speakers in their own personalized box. And to start the session, I would like to introduce our very guest of honor, Yang Muhammad Khairy Jamaluddin, the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation. So over to you, Yang Muhammad.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Seri and NEC for inviting me for this digital dialogue today on blockchain. Certainly an honor to be here with industrial experts on the subject. I chair the cluster on emerging technologies for the National Digital Council. One of the emerging technology that we've identified as being a key game changer for Malaysia is blockchain. My ministry, the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, is currently coming up with a blockchain roadmap for the country, where we see the priority areas over the next few years and how we can better utilize this technology for not just government but also in its application in Malaysia. Now, blockchain is particularly interesting right now, as the introductory remarks mentioned, because it's an emerging technology. It's something that is still nascent. It's something that many people still don't understand, and many people still just associate it with cryptocurrencies. But blockchain is something that I think is game-changing in a sense that it allows for a distributed ledger, it allows for self-sovereignty, it allows for something that is transparent, and something that is trustworthy. The application of blockchain that I've been looking at over the last few days is, of course, tracking the traceability of vaccines. So we are in the middle of trying to procure millions of doses of COVID-19 vaccines, something that I'm directly responsible for. And the problem statement that I have is, how are we going to track all these vaccines that are going to come in? We can't possibly buy from one manufacturer, and many countries have said, for instance, that we will end up procuring a portfolio of vaccines, some from pharmaceutical A, some from pharmaceutical B, not necessarily using the same technology. Some of the vaccines will be mRNA technology platform, some of it will be a viral vector platform, and most of these vaccines are two-dose vaccines. So you're going to have to track to make sure that, for instance, if Jasmine gets an mRNA vaccine, the second dose is that particular vaccine, not something else. So the traceability is a big issue for the government right now. One of the things that we've been looking at is to try to create a blockchain-enabled traceable system where we know exactly which dose, which vial you were vaccinated with, and we follow on from that when we create a health passport, a digital health certificate based on blockchain as well, and try to talk to other countries to accept our standards. And when you show your health certificate at the point of entry into another country, that health certificate is approved. So we've been looking at the application for health, in particular in vaccines, but there's so many other things we can apply this for. I've been talking to the customs department in Malaysia. We use blockchain for customs clearance, trade facilitation. We're also looking at other applications for healthcare, of course medical records, land records, which has been notorious and bureaucratic, and even looking into the future, perhaps not the next one, but voting as well. Blockchain can be applied for elections, and in the new normal, perhaps it is something that the public can trust when you have a blockchain-enabled voting system. So I think, as I said earlier, the applications are tremendous. We're trying to make sense of the technology. The standards vary right now, and in terms of the regulatory environment, I think we need to catch up to make sure that we can enable industry to develop this application faster. And these are some of the things that we'll be looking at in the roadmap over the next 6 months or so. So I'll just leave my opening remarks there, and thank NEC and Seri once again for inviting me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yang Muhammad, for the enlightening introduction. And certainly, as a Malaysian, I would like to thank YB and the ministry's effort in actually looking into using the blockchain technology actually to track the usage of the incoming vaccine for the COVID-19 to Malaysia. Now, to start off the session today for our panelist discussion, I would like to introduce the moderator for today's event, Dr. Helmi Maidin, the CEO of SERI. Doctor, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chong, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'm really glad that the introduction not only looked into what blockchain is, but Khairy in his opening remarks had also mentioned a lot about the possible implementation, the use cases that are already existing in Malaysia, and these are things that I hope we will be able to dive into over the next 45 minutes to an hour. But before that, of course, let me introduce my esteemed guest today. And we have already heard from our guest of honor, and that person is not only the person in charge of our science, technology, and innovation, but he's also someone who has obviously done a lot of policy work, a lot of investment work in the past, and has also been a member of parliament for his constituency. So there's a lot that can be looked into, not just in terms of policy making at a higher level, but the implementation on the ground. Next to him, we've got Miss Jasmine Ng, and she is the Chief Revenue Officer of iPay88, which is something that I am very familiar with when my wife goes online shopping. Now, the main thing she has is not just an experienced career in fintech, but she's also someone who used to run a blockchain company. She used to be in charge of digital strategy in Maybank. So once again, someone who has a bit of an experience and a bit of know-how as to what actually works and what doesn't. Next to Jasmine, we've got Mr. CP Chan. He is from NEC, our sponsor and our supporter for today. And he too is someone who's had almost 30 years of experience in the ICT side of things. So we will pick his brain when it comes to issues of technology, issues of infrastructure. And last but not least, John Low. He's a senior partner and a managing partner of Southeast Asia for Roland Berger, a very popular and of course a very experienced consulting firm from Germany that specializes in digital. So I will get straight to the point, and I'm going to pick on Jasmine as the very first person, since you know you're the rose among the thorns.
Yes.
And tell us, what exactly is blockchain? Everyone I've been talking to seems to think I'm going to give them investment tips today about Bitcoin. So tell me a bit more about what's the difference, why should we care, and you know a little bit more about what is out there for people.
So the reason why everybody tells you thinks that you're going to give them investment advice is simply because when blockchain technology first burst onto the scene, which is almost 11 years ago, the first use case for the blockchain technology was very much Bitcoin. So in the early days, back in 2009, you had people using Bitcoin to buy a pizza. And they tell you, oh, I paid 40 Bitcoins, which back then was worth nothing, like 4 cents per Bitcoin. And they paid for a pizza. Today, in today's valuation in US dollar, 1 Bitcoin is reaching almost 17,000 US dollars. So you can imagine what that's like. And that's why there is such a huge craze for cryptocurrency, which is a use case developed on the blockchain. But the blockchain is a lot more than that. The blockchain, one of the biggest use cases for blockchain is simply because you can, a smart contract. A smart contract is not necessarily a contract that is smart. What it does is you put in the process for delivering a particular contract onto a technology, and that technology will automatically execute what has been agreed on that contract the minute certain events happen. And that's why blockchain has been touted as the trust machine. So if you think about relationship and the need for trust before a transaction can happen, that's what blockchain allows, because it will also make sure that there is no such things as double spending. It is immutable, meaning you cannot change past records. You can update it, but you cannot change it. So there are a lot of use cases for blockchain, which we will share as the panel runs through all the necessary use cases. Back to you, Helmi.
Okay, and the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, blockchain isn't a single thing. It's just something that encompasses a few different elements, right? So there's the cryptographic keys, there's this decentralized database that you're talking about, there's the fact that blocks of information are kept separate, and then there's this sort of perfect audit trail, and access is only granted to certain people, or granted to everyone, but at the same time, it's something that has got, very clear guidelines as to who can do what. But it sounds quite complicated, and I was just wondering if maybe CP, you can explain to us a little bit about the infrastructure or the technical know-how that's necessary before we can even embark on this thing.
Sure. Yeah, and you give me all the complicated questions,
Of
right?
course, you're the IT guy, yes.
All right. Like what Jasmine said, when blockchain first burst into the scene about 11 years ago, I mean, one of the fundamental things that blockchain adopted was cryptography. All right. And cryptography is not new. It's been around for a long time. It's used in the World War, all right, when you had the allies communicating with one another. But in IT terms, right, it is important to make sure that the blockchain is secure. And cryptography was one of the underlying fundamental technology being deployed. So there are a few cryptography standards, all right, that blockchain uses. So obviously, with cryptography enforced in blockchains, and then you have hashing functions, this will ensure that the data inside, the information inside is secure, and like what Jasmine says, immutable. You cannot change it without, the rest of the users within the ledger is aware and agree to it through a consensus protocol. So it is very complicated in a way, but while blockchain started about 11 years ago, and it's quite new, but it did come quite a long way in terms of maturing in terms of technology. And at NEC, we actually started doing a lot of research and development work back in 2012, all right, where we have our lab, one of our labs in Germany, and we've put in investment there to understand blockchain there. Okay? Because at the time we realized blockchain has tremendous opportunity. Okay, and over the years, by 2016, they realized there were quite a number of things that needed to be addressed from technical vulnerability. All right, while you have cryptography and hashing and things like that, but the NEC team actually enhanced it. All right, and developed our own blockchain technology, which is more suitable for enterprise. Okay, it meets industry standards. That's important. Blockchain, the usage of blockchain, one of the ways to encourage adoption, okay, and usage is that the users have to be certain and comfortable with the fact that it adheres to certain standards. Otherwise, you will have doubts. Okay, one of the basic principles of blockchain is trust, okay, between the users when they're transacting, right? And if you are aware that this particular blockchain technology adheres to certain standards, okay, then your confidence level in transacting, in performing those things, would be at a different level. Okay, so this is where we're coming. All right, having cryptography and things like that, the right infrastructure in terms of the hardware, the network connectivity, the architecture of it. It is where we can actually add value. All right, to enterprise, to government, and we can advise. All right, what it needs or what you need to put in place to make it successful.
Your R&D research, your R&D center is in Germany, right?
We have about 10 R&D labs worldwide. So each of the labs have specific things to do, if I can say, or things to research on. All right, and so happens that blockchain, all right, it's at 2012, about 8 years back. All right, it's something which the Germany lab has undertaken to do R&D in. We've invested in those things, resources. Yeah. Okay.
And I think the issue of trust that you mentioned, in a way, brings us back to what Khairy was mentioning earlier on about health passports or travel passports, and links in quite well with what you mentioned about vaccine records. Just to maybe take a step back, I was just wondering from what you mentioned earlier on, are there plans to link it with other vaccinations in terms of childhood vaccinations or even vaccinations where we are required to take things for Umrah, for Hajj? Is that the grand plan, or are you at this moment focused more directly on COVID?
Well, I mean, I think the long-term plan would be to digitalize everything. And of course, I think it's known that the government is looking at implementing the digital ID. And from there will be a lot of records that will be stored digitally. But I think the immediate use case will be for the COVID-19 vaccines. And it's something that today I'll be discussing with my counterpart from China, not just in procuring the vaccines, but having a standard for a blockchain-based health certificate that will be mutually recognizable by Malaysia and China.
Okay. Do you think Malaysia is at a stage where we have the technical know-how to actually embrace this technology? Do we have the right education curricula when it comes to actually getting the kids of today to think of blockchain as something they might want to invest in?
Wow, that's a huge question.
Yes, it is. That's why I'm asking.
That's beyond blockchain.
Welcome to the club.
That's a question beyond blockchain. I think, look, I mean, specifically to blockchain, apart from obviously the technical requirement and knowledge required to develop blockchain and use cases for blockchain, developing the nodes, developing the blockchain architecture, the cryptography and all that, I think you have to look at the education system and see whether or not it's future-proof, not just for blockchain, but for the new economy. Obviously, there's a long way to go. We can sort of patch things up through micro credentials, through boot camps where you get people who go through the fundamental process of education, and then they learn these skills later. But whether or not the education system is future-proof at the moment, I think that's still a work in progress. I think there's a lot of things that needs to be resolved in terms of the curriculum, in terms of connectivity itself. We're having basic problems like being able to teach online without even talking about blockchain in the future. So I think there are fundamental questions that still need to be resolved. But coming back to the requirements of what you need, apart from the technical requirements, I'd say some data analytical skills, and that's sorely lacking, I think, in Malaysia, so that you can make sense of the data that's derived from the blockchain. And also, this is more of an intangible thing, but a hacker mentality, where you look at a problem and you hack away at the problem using blockchain or using whatever technology platforms there are, and that's something that we need more of. I have launched this hackathon that's going around the country at the moment, that's being run by Cradle. Some of the solutions that are being offered are blockchain-based, land registry and things like that. So we need more of these challenges, these grand challenges to be put out there so that people look at the problem, the government problem or industry problem, and utilize these technologies to create an architecture for a solution.
Okay. That's quite reassuring, actually. What about John? Do you have any examples, or have you come across any case studies from anywhere across the world, really? Not necessarily at the level of blockchain implementation, but the readiness of the people or even government in terms of embracing this tech?
Sure. Just a little bit about how blockchain came about. It came about in 2008 during the world financial crisis, right? And basically during then, the most trusted entities like banks, financial institutions, rating agencies, even the audit companies have failed us, and so that's what I would say, I would call it now the trust crisis rather than the financial crisis. So blockchain basically is a disruptor to two main issues. One is trust, and the other is the audit trail, right? So on the trust side, basically, blockchain the whole point that, it's not temporable or immutable, right? So that it basically disrupts, the trust. On the audit trail side, so where, you require anything that requires record keeping, documentation, certification, and whatnot. So there again is very useful. So looking at these 2 points, industries like, ranging, not only in capital markets, but also in energy, healthcare, legal, law, or even luxury retail, or any forms of manufacturing where The record keeping is very important. The traceability is very important. You know exactly, where the raw material is coming from, right through the whole supply chain at the end. So, I mean, to put it in a layman's term, all of us probably, probably have gone through buying properties, right? Typically, it takes 3 months or more, for the legal or for the lawyers and the bankers to do a lot of, checking, like, okay, the land title search, the bankruptcy search, the balance of mortgage payments, quit rent payment, and even stamp duty, etc. So it's a very tedious and not cost effective and not efficient process. So with blockchain, with all that, if you put all that on a blockchain technology, just imagine, we can cut short the entire process. So that's, I think, a very simple example, that, anybody can, quickly understand the applicability of blockchain technology.
Would you not put a lot of lawyers out of jobs though?
Not necessarily.
No, okay, she's coming to your rescue, yes. Go on.
Well, first I would like to talk to your point on talent development. A lot of blockchain programmers and developers are actually self-taught. And there is a little repository out there on the internet called GitHub. You can actually go out there and pull out a lot of codes. You don't have to recreate a lot of the blockchain protocols that is already popular in use today. Ethereum being one of them, Python and Python language as a programming language is fairly widely used. And it's not just for blockchain, but blockchain uses it. So you can actually, if you are interested to go into the blockchain industry and teach yourself, you can. Again, as YB mentioned, connectivity may be a challenge in terms of accessing these portals, but if there's a will, there will always be a way. So talent development within the country, I am actually quite glad to tell you, from the time that I was running a blockchain company, blockchain protocol company, we do have them. They may not have the official certificate that we talk about, and this is where we speak to skill-based hiring. So if a person can do the job versus being paperly qualified to do the job, you should really consider hiring this person. Having said that, blockchain as a technology in Malaysia, we already have developed some of the use cases to use ourselves. And believe it or not, in the Ministry of Education has actually deployed the blockchain as a test with certain local universities to ensure the authenticity of the certificate that has been issued out to their graduates. And all these records are put on the blockchain. With the advent of digital ID on blockchain, all these types of information, including your vaccination record and all these things being put on the blockchain, that is recognized, that people understand, that people acknowledge, then to YB's point, when we travel and we already have the COVID vaccine, that record, which everybody knows is immutable, is now shared. And that gives us back, or at least to some semblance of pre-COVID travel protocol, which is what everybody is looking for today.
Hoping and praying. We've touched on digital ID a couple of times already. Perhaps would you be able to just tell us a little bit more what digital ID actually is, what it actually entails in terms of preparation, in terms of I suppose government machinery working together, data silos coming together, because it's not as simple as our IC becoming digital, right?
Well, essentially, we're trying to make it as simple as that.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to make it too complicated. Yes, it's essentially digitalizing the existing NRIC that you have. We are coming up with the platform. We hope to start implementing it next year. We are targeting a certain number of Malaysians onboarding with the digital ID next year. It accelerates a lot of other use cases and applications. So imagine eKYC that financial companies need to do, or that financial apps need to do right now. And right now, it's quite laborious. It takes a bit of time. Digital ID, it'll be instantaneous. And once you have the digital ID, you can link that up with your LHDN, your KWSP. So it becomes so much easier to not just do your EKYC, to do your creditworthiness, and then you can build all sorts of APIs on top of that. So we are very excited about the digital ID. But again, coming back to the point that was discussed earlier, it's a matter of trust. I think that trust issue is huge. We saw that during the deployment of MySejahtera. People not sure whether government's keeping the records, monitoring where you're going, and we had this debate in deploying the app for COVID-19, whether we use MySejahtera, which is QR code based, or whether we use the Bluetooth notification protocol that other countries have, which is not stored on a central server. Most people didn't trust that, even though we said it's not stored on a central server. So coming back to the digital ID, it's going to be something that we need to communicate with the people that, it's not government in your phone, because that's where the digital ID will reside. As far as most people are concerned, it's on their phone, on their smartphone. So yeah, it's something that we feel will have a lot of applications in travel, in healthcare, in finance, EKYC, as I mentioned earlier, and also all sorts of government regulations right now that is synonymous with bureaucracy. Land registry is, I think, a big one that we want to try to solve.
And Jasmine, you're going to tell us a bit about how the lawyers will not lose their jobs.
Well, I mean, not all lawyers will lose their job, one. You still need somebody to show up in court and apply the law to defend you or to prosecute. So there will always be space in society for lawyers in one form or another.
I thought you were going to be a bit more complicated than that. The other thing that was linked to digital ID earlier on was you mentioned in passing about potentially voting online. And we do have a case from Estonia where, if memory serves me right, about 30% of their voters actually utilize a blockchain-based online voting system to actually put in their votes on top of what's available in the usual settings, and this is for their federal voting system. Maybe CP, would you want to look into or explain to us about what's required for that to actually happen in the first place?
Yeah, let me just briefly touch on that. I think you're right, digital ID will definitely play a big part, and what NEC has been doing over the last decade or more, is focusing on biometric digital ID and so on, and we have many successful use cases and stories around the world. I think one of them, of course, is the India Aadhaar project, which we have successfully onboarded 1.3 billion Indian nationals on the digital ID platform, supported by NEC. Now, when it comes to e-voting, it's one of the, of course, use cases. Granted that now those who have the right to vote, okay, as long as we do the necessary onboarding, the validation of the identity beforehand, we do the onboarding, that will facilitate, proper voting framework, okay, for those who are eligible to vote. They are in the right district, they are the right person, okay, so all these things are in place and the trust level is there. But what we need to have in place, of course, is the right infrastructure, okay, which YB has clearly touched on earlier, and the right framework. So a mixture of things need to be in place. So from policy setting to the right platform, the technology, and the people behind it. Okay, so we really need to make this work. All these things work together. All right, and yeah.
I suppose touching on that, so there's an Emirates blockchain strategy, and I'll read out to you the biggest challenges that they found when they were about to implement this particular project in the Emirates, or rather in the UAE. So one is the difficulty bringing together required stakeholders. Two, unclear regulatory implications. Three, educating and awareness of the involved stakeholders. Four, identifying and understanding the most relevant applications of blockchain. And last but not least, addressing governance. So in the top 10 list of problems that they had to kind of get through, or hurdles to implementation, the top 5 were actually non-technical in nature. So it's all about, in a way, human nature, the resistance to change. But I also think it's quite interesting that when they looked into the strategy, they developed themes as to what the goals are. So as technical as things are, the goals are very human in nature. So they've listed happiness of citizens and residents as one, more government efficiency in terms of what they're doing, advanced legislation and international leadership. So there's already that kind of framework where I want to take a leadership in this particular thing. I want to improve the services that I'm giving to my people.
Yeah.
Now, how do we change this? I mean, it's very difficult to gain people's trust. It's very difficult to convince people of something that's brand new, and especially in the context of a pandemic, a social economic crisis. Why should a government actually look into regulation for something that undoubtedly requires a lot of capital investment? Since it's probably Khairy's job to answer that, I'll give him 2 minutes to think. Or you want to?
I'm quite ready to jump in here,
Oh, there you
because
go.
I think coming back to the point that we were discussing about digital voting, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a technology thing, but I think the technology is there. It's not an issue of technology. I think the biggest thing is trust, public trust. This is from a public policy perspective. And I hate to come back to this issue because it's topical, but I've been dealing with this vaccine issue. And as you know, I mean, one of the biggest obstacles that we have in a national vaccination campaign for COVID-19 is trust. There are a hell of a lot of people out there who think that we're going to inoculate you with vaccines that carry small microchips, which will monitor you. I mean, this conspiracy theory has been going around the social media, and it's crazy. And it's not that we don't. The technology is there to do voting via blockchain platform, but it's whether or not people trust it. At the moment, there is already a trust deficit when it comes to elections. What more when you say we'll do it online using a digital ID, and that's really where I would like to ask the other panelists here. What would your word of advice be in terms of promoting trust in something like blockchain for utilization of government?
Yep.
So I'll jump in here. One of the things, as John had alluded to earlier, the blockchain was born in an environment where deep distrust had happened against what would be an age-old system. Wall Street, banks, auditors, even to some extent the European and American government. And that's how blockchain as a technology was born. Now, one of the reasons why blockchain is, so to speak, considered as a trust machine is because of transparency. So people can go in and look at your transaction, but your identity to a large extent is still protected because it is pseudonymous. It is not anonymous, so the criminals and all your terrorist financing activities can still be monitored because you do have tools in place to ensure that tracking happens. And actually, with the blockchain, tracking of anti-money laundering and terrorism financing activities is a lot better than what we have today in current technology for cybersecurity and hacking. So blockchain is also being looked at heavily for cybersecurity use cases as well. Now, having said that, when you allow people to peek into what we would call the engine of the matter and allow them to understand their own voting or their own transaction and how that is moved into the system, being recognized in the respective pit stop, shall we say, and then carrying on to be validated and moved, and then every time they approve somebody to access this information which is personal to themselves, they see that access happening within the system itself live. Now that, I think, would inspire the trust and the confidence necessary within the technology. And I think a fantastic use case is definitely the vaccine before anything else, and everybody would understand this gives me that much more convenience. I mean, COVID, for all of the tragedy that it has brought, it has also become a catalyst for us to move to the next millennia.
Yeah, I concur with that. Let me add on to that. The issue of trust, right? What we've realized over some of the projects we've done worldwide, it takes time. It takes time. Number one. Number two, we need to trust the government when it comes to matters like this. Okay, there's no two ways about it. All right, it's a matter of life and death. So the government will play a big part in ensuring that, hey, guys, we are united in this. I think the pandemic, on the bright side, has brought us together in many, many ways, many positive ways. And we realize that we have one objective, which is to defeat this virus. So it will take time, and the government has to put in place the right infrastructure and framework and friendly policies, if I can say, that would make everyone not jittery about, okay, if I participate in this program, will I be targeted or will I be sidelined or things like that. So it has to be clear from day one what are the benefits that everyone, whether you're man, woman, child, will get to enjoy. Case in point, like last year, NEC Argentina participated in a program, a socio-economic program, where they partner with NGO Bitcoin in Argentina and also IDB Lab. They perform a trial, right? It's not a wide-scale, countrywide kind of project, but there's this particular area in Argentina called Barrio 31, where there's this particularly big gap between the socio-economic status of the people within that area, and these communities are left out in a lot of the government services, government aids, and so on and so forth. And the government of Argentina realizes, and they need to do something about it. So it is actually a 4-year project, okay, for this particular community. So if you look at the instant fix, I don't think that will happen, all right. But there must be a concerted effort, a timeline, the right team in place, the right message that goes out to the people that this is what you will get, all right. We are not targeting anyone. We are not going after anyone. We want to help you. Okay, and this message has to be in some ways reinforced or repeated a few times. And I think the Maisajatra, initially, yes, there was some skepticism, is the government trying to track me? But over the last few months, you see everybody is like complying, or almost everybody is complying. All right, albeit there were some drastic measures, like if you didn't scan it, you get 1,000 fine. But it's behavior, right? Yeah. It's behavior. All right, so it takes time to change behavior. So technology is there. Okay, it's enabled. We are one of the leading companies or global leaders doing this, developing NEC blockchain technologies. But the other components, like the people, the processes, will also need to reflect that. Okay, we cannot use the old processes anymore. We need to probably look at new ways. You have the millenniums, the different way of thinking, how to reach out to all these people. Okay.
Just to add on YB's question, I think what we really need to do is maybe to do a lot of education. So the public needs to be aware and needs to be really, really educated. And education in the sense that you have to potentially probably do a pilot case first, not in terms of the same application in terms of e-voting. Maybe with right now the government is giving out aids in pre-Hatin program, things like that. So by doing a pilot case, you, of course, leveraging blockchain and digital ID, the government can really show that, okay, with full transparency, all the aids are going to the rightful and deserving recipients, where then people can say, hey, with combining digital ID with blockchain, where digital ID, your iris, cannot be hacked, your fingerprint cannot be hacked. So when that kind of education and going into a pilot, with that kind of, pre-Hatin, aids giving out and things like that, then people can see, hey, yeah, I'm the rightful, deserving recipient, and then then you slowly build trust on different applications of government services. Then once you build that trust, you create that education or help educate the public. Then people can say, hey, yes, this is a trustable platform for e-voting.
I suppose the sandbox that's under MOSTI is the best way for people to experiment when it comes to proof of concepts, regulatory and policy changes. Is there anything you'd like to share with us about what's being done?
Yeah, there are a few applications in the sandbox using blockchain. I can share one use case which is quite interesting, which I saw a couple of weeks ago. One problem that we're having is durian exports to China. China is a big market for our durian,
Musang
and the gold standard for durian is one of the gold standards is Musang King. Although I like the blackthorn better, but apparently Musang King is the top number one in China. There's a problem with authenticity. So when the durians land in China, there's always a haggling about whether it's indeed Musang King. So somebody has applied to the sandbox with a solution, which is blockchain traceability, essentially, saying that this is authentically a Musang King durian. So obviously, you can replicate that across so many other export cases, and that also can be used for sustainable palm oil, can be used for sustainable wood products to ensure that it's come from a sustainable logging operation. Can be used in the mining industry as well. I had a presentation being made to me about blockchain being used for mining, so you know exactly which mine that particular rare earth or whatever it is has come from. Yeah, so a lot of things are being discussed in the sandbox, and because we get to suspend the regulatory requirements in the sandbox, yeah, we can experiment quite freely.
So if anyone's tuning in who wants to get involved in that, is it as simple as going to the website?
It's it's simple as going to the website and filling out the form.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned sustainability because there are a lot of use case scenarios where, like coffee, for example, they want to have the right farmers giving the right kind of product, leading on to them getting the right payments. So there is this element of it being very positive for those who care about the environment. But on the flip side of that, there's also the concern that with the use of blockchain technology, you're actually using a lot of energy for computing powers to deal with the algorithms. So in this, once again, in this current context where more and more of our citizens are concerned about the environmental impact of technology, is this something that is going to be easy to deal with? Is it something that we have some other methods of actually making it more green, or is it something that unfortunately is a price we have to pay?
Shall I take that? So blockchain, when it first when it was first created, it used a lot of power. For especially the Bitcoin blockchain, that was the most environmentally unfriendly method of mining for a Bitcoin, for a cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency requires a little bit of activity, what we call mining. Now this is where technology has already improved in the last 10 years, that we are no longer environmentally unfriendly. So I believe NEC will be able to speak to the fact that servers now are a lot more faster without sucking up as much electricity.
Yeah, you're right. And it's not only servers; it's a multitude combination of elements. Hardware will play a big part. I think computing power since 2008, when it was first introduced, until now, you see an exponential leap in terms of the processing power, the energy efficiency, doing more with less, and things like that, right? Having multiple cores within the processor. But that plays a part. What we have discovered in our R&D over the last few years is that we also look into the overall architecture and the streamlining of processes. For example, all right, like what you say, so Bitcoin, when it was started, it was a long chain of blocks, right? That's why it's called blockchain, right? And whenever a node wants to validate a transaction, it has to download the whole block, which is, until last year, was probably about 300 gig, okay? And Ethereum, all right, when you want to archive it, is about 3 terabytes. So it does take a lot of storage. And when you want to do processing, it does need a lot of computing facility and so on and so forth. But in NEC, we have streamlined that, how we load balance processing. We don't need to necessarily get every server in the community to process. All right, we can delegate. We can enforce smart contracts to make sure that the right nodes does the right thing. Okay, so this will ensure a much more efficient way of processing blockchains. Okay, so we have come a long way since then, in a way, although it's quite new. So we have been at the forefront of doing all these things to make it more efficient, optimize for better operations, and so on. So in a way, if and when Malaysia really go full force into this area, all right, we know for a fact that there are better options out there in adopting blockchains technology that is environmental friendly and user friendly as well.
So speaking a little bit to that on the technical software side, the blockchain community has also come up with new protocols where you can do things like sharding. So you don't need to download the entire base or run the entire chain to register a new information onto the block. So there are a lot of new technology that has been developed within the blockchain community that enables faster, more efficient processing of a blockchain information. The other complaint about blockchain has always been scalability and speed, because it says, oh, it's so long, takes a day. And then there was a time where Bitcoin was so popular that it took a day before you could clear your transaction. But that is no longer applicable because new technology within the blockchain community has come on, and then of course with new development on hardware, that has already helped a great deal.
Exactly. Let me add on to that. So one of the things we have done in improving that is that our NEC blockchain technology, right? Previously, when you process the nodes, every node will have to process the chain. We have redesigned our technology in such a way that we create satellite chains, okay? And each satellite chain will have its own consensus protocol. So you run in parallel. So this will alleviate everybody doing the one task, okay? And as and when you need to exchange information between satellite chains, the edge nodes will then just swap information. So this greatly enhances the performance. One of the things we've discovered is that our one satellite chain up to 200 nodes can process about 100,000 transactions per second. All right, and that is quick and that's really fast. And when you aggregate multiple satellite chains together, I think what we demonstrated is that 3 satellite chains, when we aggregate them together, we are able to form 300,000 transactions per second. Now, why is this relevant? Now, we need to realize that when the adoption of blockchain goes up in the very near future, you need to have the scalability, like what Jasmine said. To do that, the speed, you don't want to be waiting, all right, for vaccination at the queue, and it's take more than an hour to process. Yeah, this is CP Chan. Okay, it has to be done in an instant because these are critical. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, I think people will be just turned off from the technology.
Exactly. Yeah, and then you will see like
What's the
it's
point?
not going to work. So let's look at something else. Yeah.
So we've talked about the how we can make it more efficient in a way. We've talked about the role of central government in actually driving this. But what about the private sector? Why should I, let's say I'm a private hospital, right? The patients would want a medical record that's easily accessible to everyone, and something that is trustworthy, something that we can keep a track of who does what. But what incentive is there for different private hospitals, either within the country or regionally, to work together to come to a common platform? Because I'll be giving away business. Is there anything that you think can entice them to change their mind, John?
No, I think when it comes to healthcare, the first priority is the patient's well-being, and we are talking about lives that are being at risk. So nothing more expensive than a human's life. So I think that should already be an incentive enough for all public hospitals, for example, to work together with the private hospitals so that everybody can accurately have access to the patient's record, the whole historical journey of what drugs, what operations, what surgery, the patient has undertaken. So I think that's critical. Outside of healthcare, you have companies like Nestle, Walmart, who has already implemented blockchain technology. Basically, again, in the interest of the customers, in terms of safety, in terms of enabling the company, to trace, if there's any food contamination, where did it come from, which source, which producer was the one, that supplied the raw material. So again, it improves efficiency. We're talking about, people's life, people's health, people's safety. Not only that, but, there's also other applicability, like, for example, energy. There's now peer-to-peer trading where, if you have solar panels in your rooftop, and if there's excessive energy that you are generating, you can actually trade your excess energy, and and with other consumers, and hence it actually helps sustainability. It helps the environment, and also you also help the government, in terms of spending less on infrastructure and things like that.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to John also. I think concerning the healthcare industry, right, especially the private. So one of the most relatable use case to healthcare is also insurance, right? I mean, some of us probably have visited private healthcare before, and they will ask you, "Do you have insurance?" Okay, and what type of insurance? So, and that process today is also quite, it's archaic. It's old. All right. Okay, and we can improve on that.
As a doctor, I can tell you it takes about 3 centuries. Yeah, go.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you know about that. So I think there are incentives in there. So ecosystem, all right, other than healthcare, so the ecosystem within that particular industry, I believe it will greatly benefit. All right, and they need to see this. Yeah.
And it's also already greatly implemented globally. You have myclinic.com, you have MediBlock. So there's all this that's already been, I would say, use cases that we can actually learn from, and we can do a quantum leap and not go through the painful lessons that they may have gone through.
I just wanted to refer to the questions that have been coming up. There's a screen here with the questions that I think some of the viewers have been typing out. Without going into the specifics of the question, I just want to share my view. I mean, it will summarize also what the answer to some of these questions are. And this has to do with the trust crisis that we spoke of earlier. Blockchain came up at a time where people lost trust in central authority, whether the investment banks, governments, rating agencies, and things like that. And that's really where blockchain took off. I think blockchain can be a technology that will, ironically, restore trust in central authority. If governments deploy it and explain it properly, that it's something that's immutable, that nobody can tamper with your records, nobody can change what is in your digital ID without you knowing it. I think it will restore trust in certain central authorities who are transparent in their rolling out of blockchain. But the key hurdle here, apart from trust, is education. I bet you, if you ask 10 people on the street, what is blockchain, 9.5 people will not be able to tell you what blockchain is. Or that 0.5 person will say it's Bitcoin. Yeah? It's not an easy thing to understand. I mean, I took a while to understand it as Minister of Technology as well. And, I've been reading it for the last few months. So it's something that is actually not that easy to understand. Let's be frank here. So we need to be able to, industry players, government, need to be able to explain this blockchain in a much clearer way, and for the use case to be transparent and accessible. I mean, some of the use case demonstrations that people have come to show me, I mean, I can't even make up what it is because it's a bunch of encrypted keys and things like that. So it's gibberish to me. So it has to be something that's demonstrated, perhaps on a pilot scale, and something that slowly you educate the public that this is something that will enable the information that's stored to not be tampered with by any single person. That's the key message initially that has to get out there before they trust. I mean, there were questions about using blockchain for registration of voting, voter registration, not e-voting at first. Well, that question is answered because we've gone to automatic registration now, so hopefully you won't have to register. There was another question about health passports being used in Russia for traveling. That's something that, Russian airline is already using a digital health pass for COVID test results. We're trying to do that with the vaccinations. Hopefully we'll have a feature in MySejahtera, which is backed by blockchain, showing that you've been vaccinated. And we're working towards getting better technology on rapid test kits, so at least you can show that you've been tested over the last 24 hours or so. So some of these things are already
in the pipeline. I don't know if anyone else want to take the technical questions.
I think what I would perhaps want us to answer as a group is this last question here. There is this question by Aina from UITM. Now she says she's doing her master's research and blockchain technology is one of her variable. So she's someone who obviously knows the technology pretty well, or by the end of her master's at least you would hope so. And she asked about the question of what else is there besides people's trust. And I'll combine that with another question, which basically asks, where does Malaysia play a role in this? Because it's, how do we become, the way that we discussed earlier about UAE wanting to be a leader in the field when it comes to legislation, what can Malaysia do? Where is our niche? What can we focus on? Because we can't really be everything to everyone. So what areas should we perhaps be a little bit more focused on? And perhaps that can help Aina also decide what to focus on when she graduates.
If I may propose a suggestion, one of the things that I believe Malaysia could play a role in is helping the rest of the region determine a blockchain protocol that will enable the exchange of chain information to a large extent speak to interoperability. Because once a protocol is developed, just like how email burst into worldwide usage is because there was an accepted protocol that is being deployed by all parties using the technology. And this is where it gets a lot more fun for us as Malaysian. And I think it is something that we definitely can do. Our people have the brain power to do it. The internet does give us sufficient information, knowledge, and know-how to access this. The other thing about quantum computing, yes, one of the things, the more traditional blockchain can be hacked with quantum computing, but that's not been proven yet, one. Two, the blockchain industry is moving every day. There are thousands and millions, if not billions of people going into GitHub, which is free resource, looking at the codes and trying to do better, one up from the guy who placed the code there. And that's the amazing thing about the blockchain community. Everybody is in there to collaborate and do greater things. So this is something that I think we can do as a country to set the standard, at least if not for within ourselves, for the rest of the region.
Can I just respond quickly to what Jasmine raised? I think that's a fantastic point about regional protocols for interoperability. That's good for trade facilitation, for customs clearance. It helps a lot because for these things there's a counterparty in another country. So that country has one thing that I mentioned earlier, which I wanted to highlight, is to try to create these travel bubbles. So once you have these jointly recognized protocols for health certificates that are backed by blockchain, then it makes it easier. So I'm trying to do this with the Chinese, so at least we can open a corridor once the vaccination is ready. But I think we can do that across ASEAN as well, and start with a group of ASEAN countries first.
CP, what would it take for NEC to open an R&D center in Malaysia?
I think this question has to be left to my boss. Well, we've already invested in a center of excellence in Iskandar. So there's a commitment to the country and to the region. We want to be, the shining light, if I can use the word, all right, in terms of the ASEAN region, okay, in driving AI development, all right, within the country, developing local skills, encouraging them to take up all this advanced technology field or arena. So we'll have to relook at it, all right. Obviously, we have a blockchain R&D lab in Germany, but it doesn't mean that it's mainly focused in Germany as well. We have access to those knowledge base there, and we might look into maybe just because if with the government's support, all right, and incentives and so on, yeah, why don't we just have some focus areas we can do blockchain R&D or development here. Okay.
Sean, is there anything you can share about what you feel Malaysia's strengths are, and perhaps also our weaknesses? Where do you think we should not spend our money on?
No, I think probably easier if I talk about where we should spend more effort on. As you know, we are a very strong manufacturing country, and I think that's really a place that we can really start. To give international buyers or other countries, the confidence that Malaysian products 100% traceable. Not only that, doing business with Malaysia, like what YB said, the whole trade, the customs clearance, even your letter of credit, invoicing, and all that kind of can be, blockchain. So, I think that's where we can really differentiate ourselves and and position the Malaysian products to be better accepted globally, and especially you're talking about agricultural products, shrimp, things where people want to ensure that there is that we have whether it's organic, inorganic, doesn't matter, but the safety part of it really can help differentiate us.
Okay.
There's another use case, I mean, following from that, which we've been discussing. This is quite a big market, which is the halal market.
Yeah.
So halal traceability is a huge thing because, people don't trust. Basically, I mean, certain halal certifications, like the Malaysian one, is quite trustworthy internationally. But because there are so many different certification standards, that people want a blockchain solution to halal traceability as well, so that you know exactly where that particular cosmetic or pharmaceutical item or food has come from.
So I think we've got about 10 minutes more, so I'll read up a couple of questions. Right. A search at the WIPO portal indicates that Microsoft has a patent application which includes elements of rewarding physical activity with cryptocurrency. What do you think are the activities satisfying the conditions to award cryptocurrency? And yeah, maybe Jasmine, would you want to take a
pick on the go.
stab at that? Always.
So I'll be really honest, and I say that I've not really heard of this Microsoft patent application, but there are quite a number of blockchain protocols and blockchain companies with what we call decentralized applications that want to incentivize good behavior. So beyond social impact activities like doing charity and cleaning up your environment and being physically healthy, where people are awarded cryptocurrency. Now, is blockchain necessary for that? Because you could look at that from a gaming perspective and say, hey, I give you experience points for picking up the trash and helping the very old auntie across the road, right? So
GPS trackers.
blockchain is not a technology looking for a problem to solve.
Yes.
Blockchain in itself has a lot of use cases. You don't need to put everything onto the blockchain. And this is where we talk about the more relevant ones in terms of supply chain management, authenticity management, and creating databases that is necessary because of financial records, making it cheaper. Because today, cost of compliance from the finance perspective is very high. But if you're able to deploy a technology that inherently as a DNA makes audit perfect without having to put in too much investment in IT, software or hardware, it helps with the cost of financial inclusion. And that helps with a country like ours.
Not only that, I just want to add also, about 1 million people die yearly from taking fake drugs. Yeah. So that's huge. Fake drugs. Yeah. So you once you know that this is an authenticated drug, or it's original, or it's genuine, of course it really helps. 1 million people die from taking fake drugs.
There is a question on where we can get more information, especially what's practical in Malaysia. So I think there's the impression I'm getting from the question is there's a lot of cases of what's being done overseas, but perhaps there's not much understanding or awareness of what's going on in the country. Any proposals besides the Mosties website that
No,
they
I
can-
think part of the and I think this discussion has been very informative for me. I think part of the blockchain roadmap that we're developing must be communication. I think and communication that is easily accessible by the public. I think there's not enough indigenous material, perhaps in BM, Bahasa Malaysia, on blockchain for education. That's something that we'll definitely take on board.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything to that? No. All right. I think we're coming to a close, but before that, I'd just like to get everyone's perhaps opinions, or look into the crystal ball and tell us what's going to happen in the next 5 years, because things have evolved quite dramatically since Bitcoin. And I think there has been this wave, right? There seems to be at one point everything has to be backed by blockchain. To repeat what Jasmine was saying, it seemed to be almost like a solution looking for a problem. But I think as people have come across more and more case studies about how it works, how it is very easily applied in some circumstances, and what difference it makes, what would you like to imagine would be the perfect use case for it? So we talked a little bit about e-voting, for example. Was there anything else that you think we should be looking forward to? John, perhaps?
Okay, maybe I can start. I think for me, the prerequisite is probably the implementation of the digital ID. I think once we have that, you can address a lot of the trust issues which we really talked about today. It's about addressing the trust. So for me, I would really hope that the government can launch digital ID as soon as possible, and that's a prerequisite. And then once you have that, then the applicability of blockchain will can quickly accelerate.
Yeah, I concur with John. I think that for the next 3-5 years, that is going to be crucial for the country. All right, implementing digital ID will play a huge part in enabling blockchain to be deployed more effectively. All right, adopted more by people once they see the benefits. It will take time. Okay, to do a big bang approach might be counterproductive, because there still needs to be awareness being created at all grassroots level. Okay, at the urban side, of course, we have access to technology, media, and information. But what about those outside? All right, so we also need to reach out to that. And as an industry player, we have the technology available. It's just getting the processes, the people, all in place, and that is critical. Yeah.
Also, just to add on, I think the standardized protocol is also very important, because otherwise, blockchain as it is only useful within that particular platform, and it's not interoperable. So if you have a standardized protocol, then the exchange of information, exchange of data will then make it more powerful and more useful. So that's also another important point.
So I concur with my two fellow panelists that digital ID for Malaysia is definitely important. Beyond that, the protocol and the G2G relationship to also populate that protocol across the region at the very least, so that our economic activities and travel and the relationship within the region can also carry through, especially trade relationships. And one thing is, if we are able to create a talent pool within Malaysia for this, I think that would be tremendous. Because when we talk about implementing digital ID, talking about having a standardized protocol, one of the building blocks that we will need, the country will need, is talent to build this engine. While we may be able to export certain talents, but I think nothing better than building in-house, nothing better than raising our own people.
Yeah, I'll end by saying, apart from all those things that were mentioned, sensible points that we are looking at within the government. One is a fundamental question of digital infrastructure. I think I can't stress the importance of us catching up in terms of deploying better digital infrastructure, in terms of coverage, in terms of speed, in terms of accessibility, in terms of cost, for more Malaysians. It's logical that better digital infrastructure, all these use cases for whether it's blockchain, any other technology platforms will increase. Digital talent that Jasmine mentioned is a big problem. It's something that we're looking at over the next 5 years. Again, it's not to try to, well, you have to have some systemic reform to the education system, but it's also to try to look at skills-based hiring, micro-credentials, faster deployment to the workforce. I think that's the way of the future. And lastly is data governance. This is the thing that gives me the most headache in government. We need to have better data governance within government itself. Sharing of data within departments, sharing of data with the public. Once you have that, then with the digital ID, you create this whole new API economy where people can use this data and monetize on this data. At the moment, the silos are very thick, very tall, and it's very difficult to bring down. But we've got a committee that the Chief Secretary of Government, KSN, is chairing to see if we can unlock this massive amount of data within government to try to monetize that.
I think many who are watching and tuning in will be glad to hear that, because if anything, it's the common theme to people that I've been speaking to over and over again, the issue of data silos, the issues of people not talking to each other or data not talking to each other. And yes, the other thing that I find very interesting when it comes to all these chats about digital technology, it's not really about the tech, it's really about the people. And you know, one day our AI overlords will probably get rid of us because humans are so fragile in so many ways, but not anytime soon, hopefully. So I think it just goes to say that yes, trust remains an issue, communication remains an issue, and before anything else, as Khairy mentioned, we need to make sure there's equity of access and equity of opportunity. So with that, I'm going to end today's session, and it just leaves me to thank John, CP, Jasmine, Khairy for their, not only for their wonderful and very insightful thoughts, but also for spending time with us today. And our next session is going to be on the 3rd of December. It'll be in the afternoon at 2:30, and at that point in time, we hope to talk about cybersecurity, which is something